The rain fell in sheets that December night, turning the streets of downtown Manhattan into rivers of reflected neon. Outside the Grand Lexington Hotel, beneath an awning that barely kept him dry, stood a man the world had forgotten. His name was Jake Morrison. He was 30 years old, and he was invisible. His coat, donated from a shelter 3 winters ago, hung loose on his frame. The right sleeve dangled empty, pinned up at the elbow. His left hand gripped a worn backpack, knuckles white from cold. Through the hotel's massive glass doors, he could see warmth, light, life. Inside, a wedding reception was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across hundreds of guests in tuxedos and evening gowns. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters glided between tables carrying champagne and tiny, perfect portions of food that cost more than Jake had seen in months. But what drew his attention, what made his empty stomach twist with something beyond hunger, was the piano. A Steinway concert grand, black and gleaming under spotlights, sat at the center of the ballroom, like a sleeping giant. Its lid was propped open, keys untouched, waiting. Jake pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He had not eaten in 2 days. The shelters were full. The temperature was dropping below freezing. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, he could figure something out. But tonight, just tonight, all he wanted was a plate of food. Just one plate. His breath fogged the window. Inside, a woman in a white dress that probably cost more than a car threw her head back in laughter. The groom, tall and commanding, in an immaculate tuxedo, raised a glass to the crowd. Everyone was so happy, so warm, so utterly unaware of the ghost standing outside their celebration. Jake's fingers, the ones on his remaining hand, twitched involuntarily. Muscle memory from another life, from a time when those fingers could make a piano sing, when music was not a distant memory, but his entire world. He did not know it yet, but in exactly 42 minutes, everything would change. The invisible man would be seen. The forgotten soldier would be remembered. And the wedding of the decade would become something none of these people would ever forget. But first, he had to find the courage to open that door. 23 years earlier, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, a 7-year-old boy sat at an upright piano that took up half the living room. His small hands stretched across the keys, reaching for chords that should have been impossible for someone his size. But Jake Morrison was not like other children. His father, Marcus Morrison, stood in the doorway watching. Marcus had been a jazz pianist in his youth, playing small clubs in Harlem before life and bills and responsibilities caught up with his dreams. He saw in his son something he had never possessed: true, undeniable genius. By age 10, Jake was playing Chopin nocturnes with a maturity that made his teachers weep. By 12, he had performed at Lincoln Center's Youth Showcase. By 15, he had received early acceptance to Juilliard, the most prestigious music conservatory in America. His father worked double shifts as a taxi driver to afford the tuition. His mother, Sarah, cleaned houses in Manhattan's Upper East Side, sometimes the very same apartments where the wealthy patrons who applauded Jake's performances lived. They never mentioned the irony. They just smiled at each other across the audience when their son took his bows. At Juilliard, Jake flourished. He was the youngest in his class, but the most dedicated. While other students went to parties, Jake practiced. 8 hours a day, 10 on weekends. His fingers flew across the keys with impossible speed and even more impossible grace. His professors called him the most naturally gifted pianist they had seen in a generation. He specialized in the romantics. Liszt, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, the composers who demanded not just technical precision, but emotional depth, the ones who asked a pianist to pour their soul through their fingertips into ivory and wood and make it sing. By 20, Jake had won the Johansson International Piano Competition. Prize money recording contract management representation. His parents sat in the audience in their best clothes bought special for the occasion and cried tears of joy. Everything they had sacrificed, every double shift and skipped meal and worn-out shoe, it had all been worth it. His future stretched before him like a golden road. Concert tours across Europe, recording contracts with major labels, a career most musicians could only dream about. His professor, the legendary David Mitchell, had pulled him aside after the competition. "Jake, you have something rare. Do not waste it. Do not let anything derail you from this path. The world needs your music." Jake had smiled, confident and young, and certain of his destiny. "Nothing will stop me, Professor. This is who I am. This is all I will ever be." 6 months later, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Jake walked into a military recruitment office in Times Square. He was 22 years old. His first major concert tour was scheduled to begin in 3 months. His parents had already bought their plane tickets to follow him to Vienna, Paris, London. The recruiter, a Marine Corps sergeant with hard eyes and a harder handshake, looked at Jake's application with surprise. "Son, you are going to Juilliard. You have a music career waiting." Why do you want to enlist? Jake had thought about this question for weeks. How could he explain that every time he watched the news, every time he saw soldiers his age fighting and dying in distant deserts, he felt a pull he could not ignore? How could he make anyone understand that his gift, his talent, suddenly felt selfish when others his age were sacrificing everything? "Because some things are more important than music," Jake said quietly. "My country is at war. People my age are fighting. I cannot just play piano while they bleed." The sergeant studied him for a long moment. "You know what you are giving up." "Yes. And you are sure," Jake thought of the Steinway waiting in his practice room, the concerts he would miss, the career he was throwing away. He thought of his father's face when he told him, the disappointment, the confusion, the anger. "I am sure," Jake said and signed his name. His father did not speak to him for a month. His mother cried every night. Professor Mitchell called him foolish, short-sighted, wasteful of his gift. His fellow students could not understand. Even his girlfriend, a violinist named Catherine, broke up with him. "I cannot watch you throw your life away," she said through tears. But Jake shipped out to basic training that fall. He left behind his tuxedos, his sheet music, his carefully maintained calluses on his fingertips. He left behind everything that had defined him for 22 years. In Afghanistan, in the moments between firefights and patrol missions, Jake found an old keyboard in the rec room. It was missing keys, and half the sounds were broken. But he played it anyway. Jazz standards mostly. Billy Joel, Elton John, songs the other soldiers knew and could sing along to. That is where he met Danny Cross. Danny was a combat medic from Detroit, tall and broad-shouldered, with an easy laugh and steady hands. He was the kind of person everyone trusted, everyone liked. He would sit next to Jake at the broken keyboard and harmonize with a voice like smooth whiskey. "You got magic in those hands," Morris and Danny would say. "When we get home, I am coming to one of your fancy concerts. Front row. I will wear a suit and everything." "Deal." Jake would laugh. "I will dedicate the whole performance to you." They became brothers in the way only combat can forge, the kind of bond that goes beyond friendship, beyond family. The kind where you trust someone with your life, every single day, and they never let you down. On March 15th, their convoy hit an IED on a dusty road outside Kandahar. Jake remembered the sound first. Not an explosion, but a crack like the world breaking in half. Then light, then heat, then nothing. He woke up 3 days later in a military hospital in Germany. The first thing he tried to do was move his right arm. It did not move. He tried again. Nothing. He looked down. The arm ended just below the elbow. Clean white bandages. The ghost of sensation where his forearm and hand should have been. Phantom fingers that would reach for phantom keys for the rest of his life. A nurse was there immediately. "Easy, soldier. You are okay. You are safe." "My arm," Jake whispered. His voice sounded strange, distant. "I know. I am so sorry. But you are alive. That is what matters." "Danny." Jake's eyes went wide. "Where is Danny?" The nurse's face told him everything before she said the words. "He pushed you out of the blast radius. He saved your life. I am very sorry." Jake closed his eyes. The world went dark, and stayed dark for a very long time. 8 years passed. 8 years that felt like 80. Jake tried to adjust. The doctor said it would take time. The therapist said everyone's journey was different. The VA said they would help, but the appointments were always months away, and the help never quite came. His father visited him in the hospital, old and tired and broken by his own grief. "You can still play, son, one hand. There are pieces written for one hand. You can adapt." But Jake could not bear to try. Every time he looked at a piano, he saw his complete hands, his lost future, his friend's face. The music that had once been his salvation became his torture. His father died 2 years after Jake came home. Heart attack, the doctors said. But Jake knew better. His father had died of a broken heart, watching his son throw away his gift twice. Once for war, once for grief. His mother followed a year later. Cancer fast and merciless. Jake stood at both funerals in his old army dress uniform, the right sleeve folded and pinned, and felt nothing. The numbness was complete. He tried to work. Fast food restaurants, warehouses, anything that would take a one-armed veteran with PTSD and nightmares that woke him screaming. Nothing lasted. Employers were sympathetic until they were not. Co-workers were understanding until they were not. The VA benefits were not enough. The disability check barely covered a studio apartment in the worst part of town. Then it did not even cover that. Eviction notice. Shelters. Park benches. The slow, inevitable slide into invisibility. He became one of the people others looked away from. The homeless veteran with the empty sleeve and the haunted eyes. The one people dropped quarters into cups for if they acknowledged him at all. The one who represented failure and bad luck, and all the things comfortable people feared could happen if the universe turned cruel. But Jake never begged, not until tonight. Not until hunger and cold and the crushing weight of 8 years of loss finally broke something inside him that had refused to break before. So here he stood outside the Grand Lexington Hotel, watching a wedding reception through glass and contemplating the unthinkable. Going inside, asking for food, risking the humiliation, the rejection, the confirmation that he had fallen so far that even scraps required begging. The rain soaked through his coat, his stomach cramped with hunger. His hand, the one that remained, shook from cold and something deeper than cold. Jake looked at his reflection in the glass. A ghost stared back. Hollow cheeks, overgrown beard, eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. Who was this person? Not the prodigy who had played Lincoln Center, not the idealistic soldier who had signed away his dreams, just a broken thing that used to be a man. Security guards patrolled inside the lobby. Big men in dark suits with earpieces and suspicious eyes. They would throw him out immediately. But maybe, just maybe, if he was fast enough, if he was quiet enough, he could grab something from a tray. Just one piece of food. Just enough to make it through another night. He had survived firefights in Afghanistan. He had survived losing his arm and his best friend and his entire identity. Surely he could survive the humiliation of begging for food at a stranger's wedding. Jake took a deep breath. The rain fell harder. Inside, the party continued oblivious to the desperate man about to crash their celebration. He reached for the door handle with his remaining hand. This was it. The moment where whatever dignity he had left would finally completely die. But he was already dead, wasn't he? He had died on that road in Kandahar 8 years ago. Everything since then had just been a ghost going through motions. Time to see if ghosts could still feel shame. Jake pulled open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit him first. After hours in the December rain, the heated air of the hotel lobby felt like stepping into another world. Jake stood just inside the door, dripping water onto marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than he had earned in the last year. The lobby was enormous. Marble columns soared 30 feet to a ceiling painted with cherubs and clouds. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung overhead. Everything gleamed. Everything whispered of wealth so casual, it did not even notice itself. A concierge behind a mahogany desk looked up, saw Jake, and his expression shifted from professional welcome to professional concern in half a second. Jake kept moving before the man could reach for his phone. The ballroom was down the main corridor. Jake could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. He walked quickly, but not too quickly. Look like you belong, he told himself. Look like you have every right to be here. A wedding sign on an easel announced the celebration Sterling. Whitmore Wedding Reception. Grand Ballroom. Below that, in elegant script, Private Event. Of course it was private. Everything good in this world was private, reserved for people who belonged, people who had not failed at every single thing they had ever attempted. Jake slipped past a distracted waiter and into the ballroom itself. The sight nearly stopped him in his tracks. 500 people, maybe more, filled the massive space. The men wore tuxedos that fit like they were born in them. The women wore gowns that cost more than cars' jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight. A 12-piece orchestra played on a raised platform. Ice sculptures the size of people slowly melted into elaborate fountains. The bar was crystal and gold and stretched 40 feet long. And the food. Oh God, the food. Buffet tables lined an entire wall. Lobster, prime rib, sushi, dishes Jake could not even name. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. His stomach cramped so hard he almost doubled over. No one had noticed him yet. He was just another body in the crowd, assuming he moved with confidence. Fake it. Act like you belong. Get some food and get out before anyone looks too close. Jake made his way toward the buffet, staying near the edges of the room. A group of men in tuxedos laughed too loud nearby, drunk and happy. A cluster of women compared engagement rings. Everyone was absorbed in their own conversations, their own importance. He was 10 feet from the buffet when a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was deep professional and absolutely not asking a question. Jake turned slowly. The man was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. Head of security based on the earpiece and the way he carried himself. His skin was dark, his eyes sharp, and something in his expression suggested military training. His badge read, "Marcus." "I don't believe you're on the guest list," Marcus said quietly. His grip on Jake's shoulder was firm but not brutal. "Not yet." "I just need," Jake started, but his voice cracked. "When had he last spoken to anyone? You need to leave, sir. This is a private event." "Please." Jake hated the desperation in his voice. I haven't eaten. I just need some food. I won't bother anyone, please." Marcus's expression flickered, something that might have been sympathy. But then his jaw set. "I'm sorry. I have a job to do. Come with me." "Wait." Jake's remaining hand came up pleading. His coat sleeve fell back, exposing his arm. The one that ended too soon. The scar tissue, the prosthetic socket he could no longer afford to maintain the obvious amputation. Marcus's eyes went to the arm, then to Jake's face, really looking at him for the first time. Seeing the haunted eyes, the gaunt cheeks, the bearing that suggested military service even through the layers of defeat. "Brother," Marcus said quietly. "Are you?" "Veteran," Jake said. "Afghanistan. 8 years ago. I'm sorry, I'll go." Marcus's grip loosened slightly, his expression complicated. "Listen, man, what is going on here?" The voice cut through the party noise like a knife through silk. Everyone near them turned to look. The music did not stop, but conversations did. A circle of attention formed around them. The woman approaching wore a wedding dress that probably cost more than Jake's father had earned in a year. Her makeup was flawless, her hair an elaborate sculpture of curls and crystals. Her face was beautiful in the way of magazines and surgery, and absolute certainty that the world existed to admire her. This was the bride. Vanessa Whitmore, soon to be Vanessa Sterling. Jake had seen her face on a billboard once, a model, or an influencer, one of those people famous for being famous. "Get that disgusting man away from my wedding," Vanessa's voice pitched high, carrying across the room. More heads turned. The orchestra actually stopped playing this time. "Ma'am, I'm handling it," Marcus said calmly. "He's filthy. He's dripping water on the floor. He probably has diseases." Vanessa's voice rose with each sentence. She turned to the growing crowd. "Can you believe this? On my wedding day, Jake wanted to disappear. Wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him. Every eye in the ballroom was on him now. The invisible man made painfully, humiliatingly visible. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll go." "Yes, you will go." Vanessa turned to Marcus. "Why haven't you thrown him out already? What do we pay you people for? You people!" Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained professional. "Sir, please come with me." Jake nodded, defeated. It had been stupid to try, stupid to hope. He turned toward the exit. Marcus's hand still on his shoulder, guiding him away. And then another voice cut through the room. This one different, male, cultured, amused. Wait. The crowd parted like a sea. The groom approached. Richard Sterling. Jake knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Tech billionaire. Self-made. Started a software company at 23 and sold it for $3 billion by 30. Now 35, and running a venture capital firm that funded half of Silicon Valley's unicorns. Forbes cover story. Time's Person of the Year nominee. The kind of success story America loved. He was tall, fit, with perfect hair and a smile that had been professionally whitened. His tuxedo probably cost $10,000. His watch cost more than a house. He moved through the world with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been told no. Richard Sterling looked at Jake the way someone might examine an interesting insect. "What do we have here?" "Nothing, sir," Marcus said quickly. "I'm removing him now." No, I'm curious." Richard's smile widened. He turned to address the crowd, raising his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have an uninvited guest." Nervous laughter rippled through the ballroom. Jake felt his face burn. "What's your name?" Richard asked, still smiling. "Jake," he said quietly. "Speak up, Jake. We can't hear you." "Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison." "And why have you crashed my wedding, Jake Morrison?" The way he said it, the mocking tone barely hidden under false politeness. The crowd was his audience, and Jake was the entertainment. The joke. "I was hungry," Jake said. "I'm sorry, I'll leave." "Hungry?" Richard laughed. "Did you hear that, everyone? He's hungry?" He turned back to Jake, eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "And I suppose you thought you'd just help yourself to our food? Just walk in and take what you want. Jake could not find words. "Are you homeless?" Jake Morrison. Silence. Jake's throat closed up. "I asked you a question. Are you homeless?" "Yes," Jake whispered. Louder. "Yes," his voice stronger now, anger starting to burn through shame. Fascinating. Richard circled him slowly, performing for the crowd. "And that arm? What happened there? Construction accident, bar fight, war," Jake said through gritted teeth. Richard stopped, raised an eyebrow. "War? You're a veteran?" "Sure you are." Richard's smile turned sharper. "You people always say that when you want handouts. Stolen valor is so common these days. I served in Afghanistan, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. 2 tours. Lost my arm to an IED outside Kandahar on March 15, 2015. The specific details made Richard pause, but only for a moment. Easy enough to memorize facts. "Do you have proof my discharge papers are in a storage unit I can't afford to access anymore?" "How convenient." Jake's remaining hand clenched into a fist. The humiliation was complete. Everyone was staring, some with pity, some with disgust, some with the same cruel amusement as Richard Sterling. Phones were out now recording. This would be online before midnight. The homeless faker crashed billionaire wedding. Claimed to be a veteran. Got what he deserved. Vanessa appeared at Richard's side, clutching his arm. "Richard, please. Just make him go away. He's ruining everything." "No, darling. This is just getting interesting." Richard's eyes never left Jake's face. "So you're a veteran. A hero. And now you're here begging for scraps at my wedding. What happened, Jake Morrison? How does someone fall so far?" Every word was a blade. Every smile was poison. Jake had faced enemy fire, had watched his friends die, had survived injuries that killed stronger men. But this was different. This was a different kind of warfare. He was tired. So tired. Tired of surviving. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being ashamed. Of being alive. Jake looked at the Steinway grand piano sitting untouched near the orchestra platform. The keys gleamed under the lights. He had not touched a piano in 8 years, had not allowed himself to even think about music. Danny's voice echoed in his memory. "You got magic in those hands, Morrison. Not hands anymore. Just hand." Singular. Could you play piano with one hand? Could muscle memory survive 8 years of deliberate forgetting? The words came out of Jake's mouth before his brain approved them. I can play. The room went silent. Richard Sterling's smile faltered for just a second. What, the piano? Jake nodded toward the Steinway. I can play it, for food. Just let me play something and I'll take whatever food you're willing to give me. Then I'll leave. The silence stretched. Then someone laughed. Then another. Then the whole room was laughing. Not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind of laughter that comes from absurdity. The one-armed homeless veteran wants to play piano. The joke writes itself. Vanessa pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Is he serious? Richard Sterling's smile returned wider than before. He had found his entertainment for the evening. You want to play piano? With one arm, yes. This I have to see. Richard raised his voice to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, our uninvited guest has offered to provide us with a performance. How generous, more laughter, someone shouted. Play chopsticks, more laughter. Richard held up his hand for silence. When he had everyone's attention, he spoke clearly. Jake Morrison, I'll make you a deal. If you can play one complete piece of classical music, something actually impressive, I will give you $5,000 in cash right now. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Vanessa looked shocked. Richard continued enjoying himself immensely. Furthermore, I will donate $50,000 to whatever veterans charity you name. The room buzzed with excitement. This was better than any entertainment they had planned. Real drama, real stakes, a real live underdog story, except everyone knew how these stories ended when they happened in real life. But Richard raised a finger. The room quieted. When you fail, and trust me, Jake Morrison, you will fail. You will leave this hotel immediately. You will not take any food. You will not take any money. And you will never show your face here again. Do we have a deal? Jake's heart hammered in his chest. $5,000. $50,000 to veterans' charities. Food, dignity, hope. All he had to do was play piano with one hand, play something impressive with an arm he had not used in 8 years, play through PTSD and trauma and muscle memory that had calcified into scar tissue. Impossible. But then again, surviving Afghanistan had been impossible. Surviving the blast that killed Danny had been impossible. Surviving 8 years on the streets had been impossible. Jake lifted his chin, met Richard Sterling's mocking eyes. Deal. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. People pulled out phones, positioned themselves for better views. This was going to be something to tell people about. The night a homeless man humiliated himself at Richard Sterling's wedding. Vanessa tugged on Richard's arm. Richard, don't encourage this freak, just have him thrown out. Where's the fun in that, darling? Let's give the poor man his moment of glory before his inevitable failure. Richard turned back to Jake. Well, we're waiting. Marcus, the security guard, leaned in close to Jake's ear. His voice was barely a whisper. Brother, you don't have to do this. There's no shame in walking away. But there was shame. Jake had been drowning in shame for 8 years. Maybe it was time to drown in something else. I have to, Jake said quietly. For Danny, for everyone like us who came home broken. Marcus's hand tightened briefly on Jake's shoulder, then released. Then I'll be watching. Good luck, brother. Jake walked toward the piano. Each step felt like walking toward an execution, or a resurrection. He was not sure which. The crowd parted before him. Jake was aware of every eye, every phone camera, every whispered comment. His boots donated, and too large squelched with each step. Water dripped from his coat onto the pristine floor. He left a trail of poverty across wealth visibility, across invisibility. The Steinway waited. Jake had not been this close to a concert grand in 8 years. The last time had been at Juilliard in a practice room that smelled like rosin and old wood and possibility. He had played Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto, all 40 minutes of it perfectly. Professor Mitchell had stood in the doorway afterward, tears in his eyes. "Jacob, you are going to change the world with music like that." 3 weeks later, Jake had enlisted. The practice room had remained empty, waiting for a pianist who would never return. The Steinway before him now was newer than his old practice piano, better maintained, more expensive. The black lacquer finish reflected the ballroom lights like still water. The lid was propped at full stick, opening the soundboard to the room. The keys were ivory, real ivory from an era when such things were still legal. Each one perfectly weighted, perfectly balanced. Jake stopped 3 feet away. His hand trembled. His missing arm ached with phantom sensations. His fingers, the ones he still had, twitched involuntarily. Behind him, the crowd murmured. Excited. Anticipatory. The same energy as a Roman Colosseum waiting for lions to be released. They knew how this would end. The homeless man would sit down, play a few pathetic notes, and fail spectacularly. It would be sad and funny and deeply uncomfortable. And then they would all go back to their champagne and their lives and have a story to tell at future parties. Richard Sterling's voice carried across the room. "Any time now, Jake Morrison. Unless you're having second thoughts." Jake's jaw clenched. He moved to the piano bench and sat down. The bench was perfect height, professional grade, cushioned just enough. It felt like coming home and visiting a grave at the same time. He positioned himself carefully. The bench was designed for 2 hands for symmetry. With only one arm, Jake had to sit slightly off-center to give his left hand full range of motion. His right side felt empty, exposed wrong. The keys stretched before him. 88 of them. 52 white, 36 black. 7 octaves and a bit. An entire universe of sound if you knew how to find it. Jake's left hand hovered over the keys. The fingers were rough now, calloused from labor instead of practice. The nails were too long and ragged. His hand shook. Around him, the ballroom had gone silent. 500 people holding their collective breath, waiting for failure. Jake closed his eyes. Memories flooded through him, unstoppable as a dam breaking. His first piano, an upright in their Brooklyn apartment with sticky keys and a bench that wobbled, his father's hands guiding his smaller hands. Feel the music, Jacob. Don't just play notes. Feel what the composer felt. His 10th birthday. His parents had saved for months to buy him a keyboard with weighted keys. He had cried not from joy, but from the weight of their sacrifice. "I'll make you proud," he had promised. "I'll be so good that it'll all be worth it." Juilliard. The practice rooms that became his sanctuary. 18-hour days. Bleeding fingers that he bandaged and kept playing. The moment Professor Mitchell told him he had been accepted into the advanced performance track. "You have a gift, Jacob. A responsibility to share it with the world." Afghanistan. The broken keyboard in the rec room. Playing Take Me Home Country Roads while Danny sang harmony. The way music could transport them even briefly away from war. Danny's voice rich and warm. When we get home, man, I'm coming to your concerts. All of them. I'll be your biggest fan. The explosion. The moment of silence before pain. Danny's body shielding his own. The last words Danny said, barely a whisper, as the light left his eyes. You better play for both of us now, brother. Don't you dare waste those hands. But Jake had wasted them. Wasted everything. Let the gift die with Danny. Let the music rot in memory. Let the world win. His father's funeral. Standing at the grave in his army dress uniform, the right sleeve empty and pinned. His mother beside him, frail and already dying, whispering through tears. Your father's last words were about you. He said, "Tell Jacob the music isn't gone. It's just waiting." I didn't understand what he meant. Do you? Jake opened his eyes. The piano keys swam in his vision, blurred by tears he did not remember shedding. He understood now, understood what his father had meant. The music had not died. It had waited, hidden in muscle memory, in scarred neurons, in the part of him that war and loss and 8 years of hell had not managed to kill. Jake's left hand settled onto the keys. The ivory was cool against his fingertips. The exact perfect temperature, the exact perfect weight he had chosen his piece. La Campanella. Liszt, one of the most technically demanding pieces ever written, originally composed to showcase impossible virtuosity. It required both hands' lightning speed and perfect precision. An insane choice for someone with one hand who had not played in 8 years. But Liszt himself had transcribed his own works for left hand only. After Paul Wittgenstein lost his right arm in World War I, composers had written pieces for him. The one-hand repertoire existed. It was possible. Jake had memorized a left-hand arrangement of La Campanella when he was 19 as a technical exercise. He had played it perhaps a dozen times, 12 times over 8 years ago, and now he was going to bet everything that his brain remembered. Richard Sterling's voice, loud and mocking. Interesting warm-up technique, just staring at the piano. Very avant-garde. Laughter from the crowd. Nervous laughter. Get on with it. Fail already so we can go back to celebrating. Jake looked up, found Richard Sterling in the crowd, held his gaze. This piece is called La Campanella, Jake said. His voice was stronger than he expected. It means the little bell. Liszt wrote it to sound like bells ringing. Most people need 2 hands to play it. He paused. Let the implication hang. I'm playing this for Private First Class Danny Cross, who died saving my life in Kandahar. For my father, Marcus Morrison, who believed in music until his last breath. For my mother, Sarah Morrison, who cleaned the houses of people like you so her son could follow his dream. And for every veteran who came home broken and invisible. The room was absolutely silent now. No mockery, no laughter, just silence. Jake's hand moved to starting position. First position, left hand only spanning nearly 2 octaves. His fingers stretched. His hand remembered. Let's see if a one-armed homeless veteran can play something worth listening to. He struck the first note. The first note rang out like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. E-flat, above middle C. Perfect pitch. Perfect tone. The Steinway's voice was crystalline, each harmonic shimmer clear and true. Jake's hand moved to the second note, then the third. The opening of La Campanella, the little bell announcing itself. The crowd was absolutely still. Even Richard Sterling's smirk had frozen on his face. Jake's fingers began the rapid ascending figure that formed the piece's signature. In the original, the right hand would carry the melody while the left provided accompaniment. In this arrangement, his left hand had to do both. Melody and harmony woven together, fingers jumping across octaves, playing two voices with one hand. It was technically impossible, which is why the crowd gasped when he did it anyway. His hand moved across the keys like it had never stopped. Muscle memory, 8 years dormant, woke up screaming. His fingers flew through the opening passage, hitting every note, every rhythm, every dynamic precisely as Liszt had written it over a century ago. The piece demanded speed. Jake gave it speed. His hand blurred individual notes, melting into cascades of sound. The melody danced above the accompaniment, bell-like and clear, while the bass notes grounded it with steady rhythm. Around the ballroom, mouths fell open. Phones held up to record forgot to record. People just stared, because it was not just technically proficient. It was beautiful. Jake played through the first variation. The tempo increased. The little bell became a carillon of bells ringing in complex patterns. His hand stretched to accommodate tenths intervals that should have been impossible for one hand alone. But Jake's hands. His hand had always been large, flexible, capable of reaches that made his teachers marvel. The piece built in intensity. The second variation added ornamentation trills and grace notes that decorated the melody like jewels. Jake's fingers executed them flawlessly. No hesitation. No wrong notes. Just music pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. In the crowd, Vanessa's hand had crept to her mouth. Her eyes were wide. The mocking, disgusted expression had vanished, replaced by something like shock. Marcus, the security guard, stood at attention near the wall. His eyes glistened. He mouthed two words that Jake could not see, but somehow knew. "Thank you." Richard Sterling's face had gone pale. The smirk was completely gone. He looked like a man watching his own certainty crumble. Jake reached the third variation, the technical apex of the piece. Rapid octaves in the left hand, impossible jumps, notes clustered so fast they should have been a blur of sound. This was where anyone attempting this piece would fail. This was where the piece proved whether you were good or whether you were great. Jake's hand moved like it was possessed. Octaves rang out in perfect time. Each note articulated each jump, landing precisely where it needed to be. He was not playing music. He was channeling something beyond music. Every loss, every pain, every moment of the last 8 years poured through his fingers into ivory and wood. The crowd began to sway, not consciously, but music this pure, this powerful moved bodies without permission. A woman in the front row, probably 70 years old, diamonds at her throat, closed her eyes, and tears ran down her carefully made-up face. A waiter frozen near the buffet table let his tray drop to his side, forgotten. The piece modulated keys. E-flat major to G-flat major to B major. Each key change, a new color, a new emotional landscape. Jake navigated them without thought. His brain was not driving anymore. Something deeper, something that lived in his bones and blood had taken over. He reached the piece's lyrical center, the section where the bells stopped their frantic ringing and sang a simple, heartbreaking melody. Jake's hand slowed, drawing out each note, letting them breathe and resonate. This was the moment of peace in the storm, the eye of the hurricane. In his mind, unbidden Danny's face appeared, smiling, healthy, alive. "See, I told you you had magic, Morrison. You can't lose something like that. It's in your soul." Jake's vision blurred. Tears ran down his face unchecked. His hand never faltered. The melody sang out pure and clear and devastating in its simplicity. The ballroom was a church now. These people who had been prepared to mock and laugh had become congregation, witnesses to something they did not understand but could not deny. The melody ended. The bells returned. Faster now, more urgent. The final variation approached. This was the moment when the performer either soared or crashed, the moment when technique had to combine with artistry to create something transcendent. Jake's hand accelerated. The notes came faster than thought. His fingers were independent beings now, each one knowing its job, executing patterns too complex for conscious control. This was what hours and hours of practice created. This was what 10 years at Juilliard built. This was muscle memory at its purest. The crowd was not breathing. The ballroom had become a single organism. 500 people merged into one consciousness, all focused on the one-armed man at the piano, making impossible music. Richard Sterling stood in the center of that crowd, his face ashen. He looked like a man having a religious experience against his will. His wife clutched his arm, but he did not seem to notice. He was staring at Jake with an expression that combined horror and awe. The piece built toward its climax. The bells rang faster, higher, more complex. Jake's hand raced up the keyboard, each note perfect, each phrase shaped with intention. He was flying now. The music had caught him, lifted him above the ballroom, above his broken body, above 8 years of hell. And then, without warning, without permission, memory overwhelmed him. Jake's hand played on automatic, but his mind was elsewhere. He was 7 years old, sitting at the upright piano in Brooklyn. His father stood behind him, hands on his small shoulders. Music is not about the notes, Jacob. It's about what the notes say. Every composer is trying to tell you something. Your job is to listen and then tell everyone else. But what if I don't understand what they're saying, Papa? Then you play until you do. The music will teach you, I promise. The memory dissolved. Jake's hand continued playing, moving through the piece's middle section. Around him, the ballroom crowd was absolutely still, caught in the spell of sound. Another memory surfaced. Jake, at 15, at his Juilliard audition. The panel of 5 judges, all former concert pianists themselves, sitting stone-faced as he played. He had chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The piece everyone played, the cliché, but he had played it with such raw emotion that one of the judges had to leave the room. Professor Mitchell had found Jake afterward in the hallway. Why that piece? Why not something more obscure to stand out? Because it's about loss, Jake had said quietly. Rachmaninoff wrote it when he was 19, after his first symphony failed. He was suicidal. This prelude is what depression sounds like, what giving up sounds like, and then at the end, choosing to live anyway. Mitchell had studied him for a long moment. How does a 15-year-old know what depression sounds like? Jake had not answered, had not mentioned his mother's cancer scare that year, the way he had watched his parents try to hide their terror, had not mentioned the nights he laid awake, afraid that everything good could disappear without warning. Mitchell had put his hand on Jake's shoulder. You have something rare. Not just talent, understanding. Don't lose it. The memory faded. Jake's hand was in the upper register now, playing the piece's fastest section. The notes rang out like actual bells, each one clear, despite the impossible speed. Another memory. Jake, at 22, 3 days before shipping out to basic training. His final performance at Juilliard's Paul Hall. He had played Beethoven's Hammer-Clavier Sonata. 40 minutes of the most technically demanding music ever written for piano. His fingers had bled by the end, literally bled onto the keys, but he had played every note. Professor Mitchell had embraced him afterward, something he had never done before. "You foolish, beautiful boy. You're throwing away a gift that comes once in a generation. Some things are more important than music. Nothing is more important than music. Music is how we tell the truth when words aren't enough. It's how we connect across all boundaries. It's the closest thing to magic that exists in this world. Then I'll carry the magic with me. Play for the troops. Bring some beauty to hell." Mitchell had pulled back, eyes wet. "Promise me something. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll come back to music. Promise me you won't let anything silence what you have inside you. I promise." But Jake had broken that promise, had let 8 years pass in silence, had locked the music away so deep he thought it was gone forever. The memory shattered. His hand played on climbing toward the piece's climax. Afghanistan. The rec room with the broken keyboard. Danny sitting beside him, harmonizing to Stand By Me. Other soldiers gathered around for a moment, not in a war zone, but somewhere safe. Somewhere that music still existed. "You know what your problem is," Morrison Danny had said after the song ended. "You think music is something separate from you, something you do. But man, music is what you are. You can't separate Jake from the piano any more than you can separate your arm from your body." Horrible irony in retrospect. "I don't know, man," Jake had replied. "Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake, if I should have stayed at Juilliard. Did you make a mistake being here, keeping us sane with your playing, giving us something beautiful in the middle of all this ugly?" Danny had shaken his head. "No mistake, brother. You're exactly where you need to be." The memory dissolved into bright light and heat. The IED. The convoy stopped on the dusty road. Something wrong. Something not right. Jake's hand reaching for his rifle. Danny yelling, "Get down!" and shoving him hard away from the vehicle. The world exploding. Sound and light and force beyond comprehension. Jake flying through the air, hitting the ground hard enough to break bones. The smell of burning metal and burning flesh. The ringing in his ears that would take weeks to fade. Lying on the ground, unable to move. Looking to his right. Seeing his arm at an angle that made no sense. Seeing the blood. Seeing the bone. Seeing that his hand, his precious hand, was gone from just below the elbow. Looking left. Seeing Danny. Danny who was not moving. Danny who had taken the blast that was meant for Jake. Danny whose eyes were open but not seeing. Screaming, screaming through the pain and the horror and the immediate crushing knowledge that his life had just ended in every way that mattered. But Danny's lips moved. One last breath. One last whisper that Jake somehow heard through all the chaos. "Play for both of us now." The memory released him. Jake's hand was shaking but still playing, still executing notes at impossible speed, still telling the truth through music like Mitchell had taught him. The hospital. Waking up in Germany. The first moment of consciousness. The instinctive reach for his right hand with his left hand and finding nothing. The scream. The nurses holding him down. The sedatives that dragged him back under. Days later, stable enough for visitors. His father sitting beside the bed, old and gray and crying. "Your hand, Jacob. Your beautiful hand. It's gone, Dad. Everything's gone." "No. No, son. Your hand is gone, but you still have one left. There are pieces written for one hand. You can adapt. You can still play. I don't want to adapt. I don't want to play with one hand. I want my life back and I can't have it. It died with Danny. It's over." His father had gripped his remaining hand so tight it hurt. Then Danny died for nothing. He saved your life, Jacob. Are you going to waste it? But Jake had wasted it. Had let the guilt and the loss and the phantom pain of his missing hand consume everything. Had refused to touch a piano. Had refused to try. Had let the music die because being a half-pianist felt like an insult to what he had been. The memories came faster now, overlapping a lifetime compressed into seconds. His father's funeral. The casket lowering into frozen ground. His mother's hand in his, so fragile. He never stopped believing you'd play again. It broke his heart watching you give up. His mother's funeral a year later, standing alone at the grave. No music, no comfort. Just silence, and the weight of 2 lives sacrificed for his dream that he had abandoned. Years on the street, faces blurring together. Shelters, missions, park benches. The slow erosion of identity until he was not Jake Morrison, former prodigy, but just another invisible homeless person. Just another failure, just another statistic. The nights when he walked past music stores and could not bear to look in the windows. The nights when he heard pianos through open windows and had to walk faster, had to get away from the sound that reminded him of everything he had lost. The morning 3 days ago, when he had found himself on a bridge at dawn, looking at the water below, thinking how easy it would be to just let go. How much simpler it would be to stop fighting, to stop surviving, to join Danny and his parents in whatever came after. But he had not jumped. Some stubborn core of him had refused. Some part of him that remembered Professor Mitchell's words. Promise me you won't let anything silence what you have inside you. The memories released their grip. Jake's consciousness slammed back into his body. His hand was playing the final variation of La Campanella, the fastest section, the section that would make or break the performance. His fingers flew. Octaves arpeggio scales at lightning speed. Every technique he had ever learned deployed at once. The music built and built, climbing toward the final cascade. The ballroom was a cathedral. 500 people had stopped being individuals and become witnesses to what they did not fully understand. But they knew they were seeing something that would not come again. Jake's hand raced up the keyboard one final time. The bells rang out in glorious chaos. And then, with perfect precision, he executed the final descent. The cascade of notes that ended the piece. Down, down, down the keyboard, each note perfectly articulated despite the impossible speed. And then the final chord, the resolution. E-flat major. Both hands in the original, but Jake played it as a widespread single-hand chord in the left hand. 5 notes, 3 octaves, perfectly balanced. The chord rang out. The Steinway's voice filled every corner of the ballroom. The sound hung in the air, harmonics shimmering slowly, decaying. Jake held the chord until the sound died completely, until silence returned. His hand was shaking. His entire body was shaking. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with tears he had not realized he was crying. He had done it. Played the entire piece, without mistakes, without hesitation, with one hand. La Campanella, the little bell, ringing out across 8 years of silence. Jake lifted his hand from the keys. Slowly, reverently, his fingers ached. His arm burned. But it was the good kind of pain. The kind that meant you had pushed yourself to the absolute limit and survived. The ballroom remained silent. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Jake waited for the mockery, the laughter, the dismissal. He had played his heart out, but he was still just a homeless veteran with one arm. Still a joke. still invisible. And then from the back of the room, someone began to clap. Slow claps. Steady. Then another person joined. Then another. And then, like a dam breaking, the entire ballroom exploded in applause. The sound was deafening. 500 people all applauding at once. But it was not polite applause. Not the obligatory clapping at a wedding when the cake is cut or the first dance ends. This was something else. This was applause that came from a place beyond manners. People were standing. Not some people. All people. The entire ballroom rose to its feet in waves, starting from the back and rippling forward. A standing ovation for a homeless man who had crashed their party. Jake sat frozen at the piano bench, unable to process what was happening. His mind could not reconcile this reaction with the mockery from 15 minutes ago. It did not make sense. None of this made sense. The applause continued. Someone shouted bravo, then another. Then a dozen voices calling out in appreciation. People were crying. Actually crying. The woman with diamonds who had wept during the performance was sobbing openly, now her hands clasped to her chest. Jake stood slowly, unsteadily. His legs barely held him. He turned to face the crowd, and the applause somehow got louder. Whistles. Cheers. The kind of response usually reserved for rock stars, not homeless veterans at wedding receptions. Near the front, Marcus, the security guard, stood at full attention. He brought his hand up in a crisp military salute. Held it. His face was wet with tears. Around him, 3 other men Jake had not noticed before, all wearing subtle veteran pins on their tuxedos, saluted as well. The applause began to coalesce into a chant. Jake. 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 Not mocking. Not ironic. Genuine. 500 of Manhattan's elite chanting the name of a man they had been prepared to throw out like garbage 15 minutes ago. Jake's vision blurred. He could not process this, could not understand. His brain, traumatized and battered by 8 years of rejection and invisibility, could not accept that this was real. Through the crowd movement, people parting, someone walking forward, Jake's stomach clenched. Richard Sterling, the billionaire who had orchestrated his humiliation, who had bet $5,000 on his failure, who represented everything Jake had learned to hate about wealth and privilege and cruelty. Richard walked slowly, his face unreadable. The applause began to quiet, as people realized something else was happening. By the time Richard reached Jake, standing just 3 feet in front of the piano, the ballroom had fallen silent again. The 2 men looked at each other. Jake straightened despite his exhaustion. He would not show weakness now. He had played his heart out. He had nothing left to prove. Richard Sterling's face was pale. His confident smirk was gone. He looked like a man who had just seen his entire worldview shatter and was trying to reassemble the pieces. Richard's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. Tried again. I owe you an apology. The words hung in the air. Jake said nothing. Just waited. I was wrong, Richard continued, his voice stronger now, but hollow. About everything. About you. About what I thought I knew. He paused, struggling. I've never been more wrong in my life. He reached into his tuxedo jacket, pulled out his phone, tapped it a few times, then held it up so Jake could see. A banking app, a transfer screen, $5,000 to cash from Richard Sterling to Jake Morrison. Richard's finger hovered over the confirm button. I made you a deal, Richard said quietly. You played something impressive. That's an understatement for what we just witnessed. He hit the button. The money is yours. Jake's phone, ancient and barely functional, buzzed in his wet pocket. the notification of money arriving in an account that had been empty for years. Richard's hands were shaking as he pulled up another screen. And the charity donation. $50,000, you said. I'm making it $100,000. He looked up at Jake. What's the charity? Where should it go? Jake's throat was tight. The Danny Cross Memorial Fund. It supports disabled veteran musicians. Richard's eyes widened slightly. Danny Cross. The person you mentioned. The friend who died. My brother. Who died saving me. Richard nodded slowly. He typed on his phone, showed Jake the screen. Transfer pending. $100,000 to the Danny Cross Memorial Fund. Confirmed. The crowd watched in absolute silence. This was better than any reality TV, any movie, any story. This was real redemption happening in front of them. Richard Sterling, billionaire, tech genius, master of the universe, looked at Jake Morrison, homeless veteran, one-armed pianist, invisible man made visible, and said the words that probably no one had ever heard him say. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. I judged you by your appearance. I mocked your service to our country. I treated you as less than human, and you responded with grace and beauty and truth. Richard's voice broke slightly. I have never felt more ashamed of myself than I do right now. Vanessa appeared at Richard's side, her wedding dress rustling. Her makeup was ruined from crying. She looked at Jake with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry too. I said terrible things. I was awful to you. You didn't deserve any of it. Jake stood there accepting their apologies, feeling nothing. Or everything. He could not tell anymore. His emotions had gone beyond the range where his brain could label them. I don't want your money, Jake heard himself say. His voice was quiet, but clear. I never wanted your money. Richard frowned, confused. Then what I wanted you to see me. Jake's voice grew stronger. To see all of us. The homeless veterans you walk past every day. The broken people you pretend don't exist. The ones who gave everything for this country and got nothing back. He gestured to his missing arm. We're not invisible because we chose to be. We're invisible because you chose not to look. The ballroom was absolutely silent. Jake continued, I played tonight because music is the only language I have left. The only way I know how to tell the truth. And the truth is this, we're still here. Still fighting. Still surviving. And we deserve better than your contempt. Richard Sterling looked like he had been punched. He nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. The money Jake said. I'll take it. Not for me. For the next veteran who needs it. For the next person you would have walked past without seeing. Anything, Richard said quickly. Anything you need. The wedding, the guests, we can, Jake. The voice came from the crowd. An older man, maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He pushed through the people, moving with purpose. Jake turned. Froze. No, it could not be. The man stopped 10 feet away, staring at Jake like he was seeing a ghost. Jake Morrison. Is that really you? Jake's mind refused to work. He knew this face, knew this voice, but it was impossible. Professor Mitchell. David Mitchell. Professor Emeritus of Piano at Juilliard, one of the most respected music teachers in the world, stood in a billionaire's wedding reception, staring at his former student who had disappeared 8 years ago. They told me you died, Mitchell whispered. After you were wounded. I tried to find you through the VA, through military channels. They said there was no record. I thought, I didn't die, Jake said, numbly. I just stopped living. Mitchell moved forward slowly, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. I've been looking for you for 8 years. I never stopped. Why? The word came out harsh. I broke my promise to you. I gave up music. I wasted everything you taught me. No. Mitchell shook his head firmly. You just proved you wasted nothing. What you just played, Jake, that was transcendent. That was everything I knew you had inside you. It was one hand, a broken version of what I used to be. It was whole. Mitchell's voice was intense. Music isn't about how many hands you have. It's about what you have to say, and what you just said. He gestured helplessly. I have taught piano for 40 years. I have heard thousands of performances. What you just played is one of the best I've ever heard. One hand, two hands, it doesn't matter. You have not lost anything that truly matters. Jake felt his legs giving out. Mitchell caught him surprisingly strong for his age, guided him back to the piano bench. Jake sat heavily, his remaining hand covering his face. I can't go back, Jake said through his fingers. Too much has happened. I'm too broken. No. Mitchell's hand gripped his shoulder. You're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Wounded things heal. Professor, you don't understand. I'm homeless. I have PTSD. I wake up screaming. I can barely function. I'm not the student you remember. You're exactly the student I remember. A little older, a little more experienced with suffering. But the music inside you is the same. Mitchell pulled something from his jacket pocket. A business card. 3 years ago, I started a program at Juilliard, Adaptive Performance Studies, for musicians with disabilities, injuries, trauma. We have veterans, accident survivors, people with congenital conditions. We teach them to make music with whatever they have. One hand, no hands, using adaptive controllers, modified instruments. Whatever it takes. He pressed the card into Jake's hand. I named the program the Danny Cross Memorial Initiative, after your friend. You wrote me about him before you deployed. I never forgot. Jake's breath stopped. You remembered Danny? I remember everything you told me. How he loved music. How he made you promise to play for him. How he died saving you. Mitchell's eyes were wet. I've been waiting for you to come back so I could tell you what we built in his name. The ballroom was utterly silent. 500 people watching a moment so intimate it felt wrong to witness, but no one could look away. We have funding for 50 students a year, Mitchell continued. Full scholarships, housing, medical support, therapy, whatever they need to heal and make music again. And Jake, I have held a spot open for you. Every year, waiting. I can't afford full scholarship, full support, apartment and student housing, stipend for living expenses, medical care through the school, anything you need. Why, Jake's voice broke. Why would you do all this? Mitchell's expression was fierce. Because I promised myself that if you ever came back, I would be ready. Because your gift is too important to waste. Because Danny Cross died so you could live, and I'll be damned if I let his sacrifice mean nothing. Jake could not speak, could not breathe. The weight of 8 years of loss and pain and surviving crashed down on him all at once. His shoulders shook. The tears came unstoppable now. Mitchell pulled him into an embrace, the old professor holding his lost student, while 500 strangers witnessed a redemption story writing itself in real time. Come home, Jacob Mitchell whispered. Come home to music. Danny would want you to. Your parents would want you to. And God knows the world needs what you have to give. Through his tears, Jake managed to nod. Richard Sterling stepped forward again. His voice was steady now, resolved. Professor Mitchell, I'm Richard Sterling. I'm funding the program expansion, whatever you need. Double the scholarship spots. Triple them. Build a new facility. Whatever it takes. Mitchell looked at him, assessing. Do you mean that after what I just witnessed, after what I nearly destroyed, Richard's jaw was set? Yes, I mean it. Consider me your biggest donor. Marcus, the security guard, stepped forward as well. Professor, I'm a veteran too. Iraq, 2 tours. I'd like to volunteer. Help recruit veteran students. Whatever you need. Others moved forward, guests offering support, connections, resources. The wedding reception had transformed into something else entirely. A movement born from one man's music and another man's redemption. Jake sat at the piano, his remaining hand still on the keys, and watched his life change in real time. He thought of Danny, thought of his parents, thought of the promise he had broken, and was now impossibly being given the chance to keep. His fingers moved on the keys. Without conscious thought, a simple melody. Amazing grace. Slow, gentle. With only his left hand, but full of everything he could not say with words. The ballroom fell silent again, listening. A hymn for the lost. A prayer for the found. A bridge between who Jake had been and who he might become. When the final note faded, Mitchell spoke softly. "Welcome back, Jacob Morrison. The world has missed your music." For the first time in 8 years, Jake believed him. The next hour passed in a blur. Jake was surrounded by people, but for once it did not feel overwhelming. These were not hostile faces or pitying stares. These were people who had witnessed something transformative and wanted to be part of what came next. A waiter brought him food. Real food. A plate piled with delicacies from the buffet he had been trying to steal from an hour ago. Jake ate slowly, his stomach so unused to real food that it cramped. But it was the best meal he had ever tasted. Marcus sat with him while he ate, not saying much, just being present. Another veteran who understood that sometimes the best support was just being there. "I meant what I said," Marcus told him, about volunteering. "I got out 6 years ago, found steady work, but I never forgot where I came from. If this program can help more people like us, I want to be part of it." "Thank you," Jake managed between bites. "For earlier, too. When you called me brother. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Yes, because you are my brother. All of us who served, who came home different than we left, we're all brothers, all sisters, family." Marcus's expression was serious. "Don't thank me for recognizing family." Professor Mitchell had been pulled aside by Richard Sterling, the two men deep in conversation, pulling out phones, making calls. Jake caught fragments. "Meeting with the board next week. Architectural plans for a new building. Endowment of at least $5 million. The program Mitchell had built was about to expand beyond anything he had imagined. Vanessa, the bride, approached tentatively. She had fixed her makeup, but her eyes were still red. "Mr. Morrison, I just wanted to say again how sorry I am. What I said to you was unforgivable." Jake looked at her. Really looked. She was young, probably 25. Beautiful in the way that came from money and maintenance, but also scared, he realized. Scared of not being perfect, not being in control. "It's okay," he said quietly. "It's not okay. I was cruel. I was everything wrong with people like me. People like you, rich, privileged, disconnected from reality." She laughed bitterly. "I've spent my whole life trying to maintain an image, trying to be perfect. And you showed me how hollow that is. You have nothing and you're more real than I've ever been. I didn't come here to teach anyone lessons." "I know. That's what makes it more powerful." She hesitated. "I want to help. The program Professor Mitchell mentioned. I have money of my own family money. I'd like to donate." "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. I have to do something with my life that matters. This is a start." Jake nodded slowly. "Then thank you. Sincerely." As Vanessa walked away, an older couple approached. The man was distinguished, maybe 70, with an air of quiet authority. The woman beside him radiated the kind of grace that came from a lifetime of kindness. "Mr. Morrison," the man said, extending his hand. "Robert Chen. This is my wife, Patricia. I'm a federal judge, also a combat veteran in Vietnam." Jake shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Sir, I wanted you to know that what you did tonight reminded me why I still believe in this country, why I still think we're worth fighting for." Chen's voice was thick with emotion. "You could have been angry, bitter. You had every right to be. Instead, you gave us beauty. Truth. That takes more courage than any battlefield." Patricia Chen touched Jake's arm gently. "Our son was Army too. Iraq. He came home with traumatic brain injury, couldn't speak for 2 years. Music therapy helped him find his voice again. He's a music teacher now, working with special needs children. What you're about to do," Robert continued this program at Juilliard, "it matters more than you know. You're going to help people find themselves again. That's holy work, son. They moved on, but others came. A steady stream of people wanting to thank him, apologize to him, offer support. It was overwhelming, but it was also evidence of something Jake had forgotten. Most people were decent. Most people, when confronted with their own prejudices, wanted to do better. Not everyone, of course. Jake saw a few guests who still looked uncomfortable, who whispered to each other and shot judgmental glances. Some people never changed. But they were the minority now, and somehow that mattered. An hour in, Jake found himself needing air. Marcus noticed and quietly led him to a side door onto a balcony that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. The rain had stopped. The city glittered below them, a million lights in the darkness. "How you holding up?" Marcus asked. "I'm not sure," Jake admitted. "This doesn't feel real. It's real, but I get it. When good things happen after nothing but bad for so long, your brain doesn't know how to process it. Is it always like this?" The transition back. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I won't lie to you. It's not easy. The program, the support, all of it, that's amazing. But you still have to do the work. The PTSD doesn't just go away because things get better. The nightmares don't stop. The survivor's guilt doesn't vanish." "That's comforting," Jake said dryly. But Marcus continued. "You'll have resources now. Help, a purpose. That makes all the difference. I know because I've been there. 5 years ago, I was where you are. Rock bottom. Thought about eating my gun more than once." He held up his hand, forestalling Jake's response. "Don't worry, I didn't. Got help instead. VA connected me with a good therapist. Got on the right meds. Found work that mattered. It's still a fight every day, but it's a fight worth having now, because I remember who I was before the war, and I'm starting to see that person again in the mirror. Not the same, I'll never be the same, but maybe better, stronger, more real." Marcus looked at Jake. "You played music tonight that came from a place of deep pain. That's powerful. But imagine what you could play when you start to heal." Jake absorbed that. Imagined a future where the pain was less sharp, where Danny's face didn't haunt every quiet moment, where he could make music not from trauma, but from hope. It seemed impossible. But then 24 hours ago, playing piano again had seemed impossible. "Thank you," Jake said, "for everything, for treating me like a person when no one else did. We take care of our own. That's the code." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. Somewhere below, Jake had a storage unit full of possessions he could not afford to access. Somewhere out there was a shelter bed he had been trying to get for the night. Somewhere there was the life he had been living, the desperate day-to-day survival. All of it felt distant now, like a nightmare he was finally waking up from. The balcony door opened. Professor Mitchell stepped out. "There you are. I was worried you'd bolted. Thought about it," Jake admitted. "Don't. Not now." Mitchell joined them at the railing. "I just got off the phone with the dean. We're fast-tracking your enrollment. You can move into student housing tomorrow if you want. We'll get you set up with everything you need. Tomorrow? Jake's mind spun. That's too fast. I need time to… Time to what? Talk yourself out of this. Mitchell's expression was knowing. I've taught enough students to recognize fear of success when I see it. You're terrified this is all going to disappear, that it's too good to be true. Isn't it? No. It's real. It's happening. And you deserve it. Mitchell's voice was firm. Tomorrow we get you set up. Next week classes start. You'll work with our best adaptive technology specialists. We'll figure out what works for your left hand, what pieces suit your current abilities, how to expand your repertoire. It's going to be hard work. I'm used to hard work. I know you are. That's why I know you'll succeed. Mitchell paused. There's one more thing. I'd like you to perform at our spring gala, 3 months from now. Full recital. Whatever program you want. The audience will be donors, alumni, press. It'll be your debut as a comeback artist. Jake's stomach clenched. A recital. In front of people. Professor, I just played my first piece in 8 years an hour ago, and it was magnificent. 3 months is enough time to prepare. Not comfortable, but enough. You need a goal. Something to work toward, otherwise the trauma will win. It always wins when we don't give ourselves something to reach for. Marcus nodded in agreement. He's right. Idle time is the enemy. Trust me on that. Jake looked between the two men. Both veterans in different ways. Both survivors who had found their path forward. Both offering him the same thing, a future. What if I fail? Jake asked quietly. What if I can't do it? What if tonight was just an anomaly? Adrenaline and desperation. Then you'll have failed in front of people who want you to succeed, Mitchell said simply. There's no shame in that. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to surprise yourself. Through the balcony glass, Jake could see the party continuing. Richard Sterling was talking animatedly with a group probably still organizing support for the program. Vanessa was with her friends, but she looked different now. Less posed, more present. The wedding had become something neither of them had planned, but maybe something better. Okay, Jake said. The word came out before he could stop it. Okay, I'll do it. The housing, the program, the recital. All of it. Mitchell's smile was brilliant. Good. Good. You won't regret this, Jake. I already regret it, but I'm doing it anyway. That's courage, Marcus said. Not the absence of fear. Doing the thing even though you're terrified. They went back inside. The party was winding down now, guests starting to leave, but a core group remained the ones who had been most affected by the evening's events. Richard Sterling saw Jake and waved him over. Mr. Morrison, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Richard gestured to a woman in her 40s, elegant, in a simple black dress. This is Dr. Sarah Brennan. She runs the VA's new arts therapy initiative. I think you two should talk. Dr. Brennan shook Jake's hand warmly. Mr. Morrison, I've been hearing about you all evening. I'd love to discuss how you might want to be involved in our program. We work with veterans using creative arts for trauma processing and recovery. Your story, your music could inspire so many others. Another opportunity. Another door opening. Jake's head spun with the speed of it all. They talked for 20 minutes. Dr. Brennan was smart, passionate, clearly dedicated to helping veterans. By the end, Jake had agreed to visit the VA Arts Therapy Center next week to meet some of the veterans in the program. More people to meet, more conversations, more connections being made. Jake's old life, the one where he was invisible and alone, was being completely overwritten. By 2 a.m., the ballroom was finally empty, except for staff cleaning up. Professor Mitchell had called a car service. I'm taking you to a hotel tonight. Tomorrow we'll get you moved into student housing. Tonight you just rest. I can't let you pay for a hotel. The school is paying for it. Consider it an enrollment benefit. Mitchell's tone left no room for argument. Marcus walked them out to the car, a black town car that pulled up to the hotel's entrance. Before Jake got in, Marcus pulled him into a brief hug. "Stay strong, brother. You've got this. Thank you for everything. No thanks needed. I'll see you soon." I meant what I said about volunteering. The car pulled away. Jake watched the Grand Lexington Hotel recede through the rear window. The place where he had been invisible, where he had been humiliated, where his life had changed forever. "How are you really doing?" Mitchell asked quietly as they drove through empty Manhattan streets. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "I feel like I'm in shock, like none of this is real, like I'm going to wake up on a park bench and realize it was all a hypothermia-induced hallucination. It's real! I promise you it's real!" Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "I need to tell you something about why I started the Danny Cross program." "Okay. When I got your letter, the one you sent right before you deployed, you wrote about Danny, about how he loved music, how you played for him and the other soldiers. You wrote about how music was the only thing keeping you sane over there. And you asked me to remember Danny if anything happened to you." Jake vaguely remembered writing that letter. A lifetime ago. A different person. "When I heard about the IED, when I tried to find you and couldn't, I thought you were dead. Both of you. So I started the program in Danny's name, in memory of the friend who died saving a brilliant pianist. I wanted something good to come from the tragedy. And now I get to tell you that Danny's memory is helping dozens of veterans find their way back to music, back to themselves, that his sacrifice meant something beyond just saving your life. It created a ripple effect of healing." Mitchell's voice was thick. "He'd be proud of you, Jake, for surviving, for playing tonight, for coming back." Jake couldn't speak. He nodded, looking out the window at the city lights blurring past. The hotel was nice, not as fancy as the Grand Lexington, but nicer than anywhere Jake had stayed in years. Mitchell walked him to his room, made sure he had everything he needed. "I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll go to Juilliard, get you processed, moved in. There's a lot to do." "Professor, why are you doing all this?" Mitchell smiled. "Because 15 years ago, a 7-year-old boy walked into my beginner piano class and played Für Elise perfectly on his first try. And I knew I was hearing something special. I've taught thousands of students. Some of them are famous now. Recording artists, concert pianists, composers. But you, Jake, you were always the one I knew would change the world. Not with fame or technical perfection, but with truth. What you played tonight was truth, and the world desperately needs more of that." He squeezed Jake's shoulder. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, your new life begins." After Mitchell left, Jake stood in the hotel room, not quite believing he was here. A real bed, a bathroom with hot water, safety, shelter. Things he had not had reliably in years. He showered for the first time in days, watching years of street grime wash down the drain. The mirror showed him a stranger, gaunt, scarred, older than his 30 years, but alive, still alive. He lay in the bed, clean sheets against clean skin, and waited for sleep. But his mind would not quiet. The events of the night replayed, the humiliation, the performance, the redemption. All of it felt surreal. His left hand rested on the blanket. He flexed his fingers, felt the ache from hours of unused muscles suddenly awakened. Muscle memory. 8 years dormant, and still there. Still ready. Professor Mitchell was right. The music had waited. Had not died with his arm or his friend or his old life. It had just waited for him to be ready to come back. Jake closed his eyes. For the first time in 8 years, he fell asleep without nightmares. Carnegie Hall. The name itself was legend. Since 1891, the most prestigious concert venue in America. Tchaikovsky conducted the opening night. Rachmaninoff, Horowitz, Bernstein, Gould. Every great classical musician had played this stage, and tonight, Jake Morrison would join them. Backstage in a dressing room that had hosted countless nervous performers before him, Jake sat in front of a mirror and tried to calm his breathing. He wore a tuxedo that actually fit, tailored specifically to accommodate his missing arm. His left hand, the hand that would carry the entire evening's performance, rested on his knee. The fingers were stronger now, calloused in all the right places from 6 months of intensive practice. 6 months. In some ways, it felt like forever. In others, it felt like yesterday that he had stood outside the Grand Lexington Hotel in the rain. The intervening months had been transformative. Professor Mitchell had not been exaggerating about the intensity of the program. 8 hours a day of practice, technical work with adaptive piano specialists, physical therapy to strengthen his left arm and shoulder, therapy of the other kind too, processing trauma, managing PTSD, learning to live with what had happened instead of just surviving it. There had been setbacks, nights when the nightmares came back with full force, days when his hand cramped so badly he could not play, moments when the phantom pain in his missing arm was so intense he curled up on the floor and cried. Times when he wanted to quit, to run, to go back to being invisible, because being visible meant being vulnerable. But Professor Mitchell was always there, and Marcus, true to his word, had become both friend and mentor. The other students in the adaptive program understood in ways normal people could not. They had their own traumas, their own missing pieces, their own journeys back to music. Jake had learned to play pieces he had never imagined possible with one hand. The standard repertoire: Scriabin's Prelude and Nocturne for left hand, Ravel's Piano Concerto for the left hand, Britten's Diversions. But also new works written specifically for the program by contemporary composers who understood that limitation could inspire creativity instead of ending it. Tonight's program was ambitious. 90 minutes of music, all performed with his left hand. Some traditional pieces, some contemporary one work commissioned specifically for him by a composer named Helen Torres, who had been following his story. But the final piece, the one that would close the evening, was the one that mattered most. A new arrangement of a work Jake had learned 20 years ago, but had never performed publicly. A piece that meant everything. A knock at the dressing room door. 5 minutes, Mr. Morrison. Jake stood, adjusted his tuxedo jacket, the right sleeve expertly pinned to hide the absence beneath. His reflection in the mirror showed a different man than the one who had crashed a wedding 6 months ago. Healthier, hair cut and groomed, face fuller from regular meals, eyes that could meet their own gaze without flinching. But still him. Still Jake Morrison. Still carrying Danny and his parents and 8 years of survival. Just carrying them differently now. With purpose instead of just pain. Another knock. Professor Mitchell entered, looking distinguished in his own tuxedo. "Ready?" "No," Jake said honestly. Terrified. "Good. That means you care." Mitchell smiled. "The house is full, sold out. Press from the Times, the Journal, even some national outlets. Richard Sterling bought out the first 2 rows for veterans and their families. It's quite a crowd. That doesn't help with the terror, Professor. It should. They're not here to judge you. They're here to witness. to be part of something important. Mitchell's expression grew serious. Whatever happens out there, whether you play perfectly or make mistakes, you've already won. You came back. That's the victory. I just don't want to let everyone down. You Danny all the people who believed in me. Impossible. You could walk out there and play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and you still wouldn't let us down. Because you showed up. You did the work. You refused to let the darkness win. Mitchell gripped his shoulder. But for what it's worth, I've heard your final run-through. You're going to be magnificent. A stage manager appeared. Mr. Morrison, we're ready for you. Jake followed the stage manager through the backstage labyrinth, Professor Mitchell beside him. They reached the wings. Through a gap in the curtain, Jake could see the audience filling Carnegie's Isaac Stern Auditorium. 2,800 seats, every one occupied. The stage lights were up, illuminating the Steinway Concert Grand positioned center stage. In the front rows, he spotted familiar faces. Richard Sterling and Vanessa, his hand holding hers. They had donated $5 million to the Danny Cross program after their wedding. Their first act as a married couple had been writing that check. Marcus in dress uniform medals on his chest. Beside him, his family wife and 2 kids, who looked up at their father with pride. Dr. Brennan from the VA, along with a dozen veterans from her arts therapy program. Some in wheelchairs, some missing limbs, some with invisible wounds. All here to see what was possible. Students from Juilliard's adaptive program, Jake's classmates and friends. They understood what this moment meant better than anyone. And in the center of the second row, an empty seat. A single seat with a memorial program on it, Danny Cross's name printed clearly. A seat reserved for the brother who had made this all possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcement came over the speakers. Please welcome pianist Jacob Morrison. The curtain rose. Applause filled the hall, warm and welcoming. Jake walked onto the stage, his stride confident despite his racing heart. He had walked this walk 100 times in rehearsal. He could do it now. He reached the piano, turned to the audience, bowed slightly. The applause continued building. He saw people standing already giving him a standing ovation before he had played a single note. Recognition not of what he would do, but of what he had already done. The journey he had made to get here. Jake sat at the bench, adjusted his position. His left hand found the keys. Home. The only home that had never abandoned him. The audience quieted. Anticipation hung in the air. 2,800 people holding their breath. Jake closed his eyes, centered himself, found the place inside where the music lived. The place that trauma and loss and 8 years of hell had not managed to destroy. He began to play. The program opened with Scriabin's Prelude and Nocturne for the left-hand Opus 9. Written in 1894 before Scriabin injured his right hand and briefly thought his career was over. A piece born from disability speaking to disability. Jake played it with deep understanding, his hand flowing across the keys, finding the poetry in the notes. The audience was completely still, listening not just with ears, but with something deeper, understanding that they were witnessing more than a performance. They were witnessing resurrection. Next came Ravel's Piano Concerto for the left hand, a monumental work written for Paul Wittgenstein, the one-armed pianist who lost his right arm in World War I. The piece Jake had thought about constantly during his recovery, a work that proved what was possible when limitation met determination, met artistry. Jake played with the house orchestra accompanying him, the conductor giving him subtle cues the musicians supporting but never overwhelming. The concerto's dark, brooding opening gave way to brilliant passages that showcased what a single hand could accomplish. Jazz inflections, complex rhythms, moments of delicate beauty, and moments of thunderous power. The audience erupted in applause when the last note faded. But Jake was already focused on what came next. Helen Torres's commissioned work, Elegy for the Invisible. Written specifically for Jake, after Helen met him and heard his story. The piece incorporated sounds of war, recorded samples of helicopters' explosions, radio chatter mixed with the piano. A meditation on trauma and survival, and the journey back to wholeness. It was contemporary, challenging, sometimes dissonant, but also beautiful in its honesty. Jake poured everything into it. Every nightmare, every moment of despair, every hard-won victory. The audience listened in rapt attention, many wiping tears by the piece's conclusion. More applause. But Jake did not stand, did not acknowledge it. He sat quietly at the piano, hands in his lap, gathering himself for the final piece. The one that mattered most. The audience sensed something different was coming. The applause faded. Silence returned. Jake looked out at the empty seat with Danny's name. Took a deep breath. This final piece, he said, his voice amplified by the hall's perfect acoustics, is not originally written for piano at all. It's an orchestral work by Samuel Barber, the Adagio for Strings. Many of you know it. It's been played at state funerals, memorials, moments of national grief. It's one of the most achingly beautiful pieces of music ever written. He paused. I've arranged it for left-hand piano. I'm playing it tonight for Private First Class Danny Cross, who died saving my life 8 years ago. For my father, Marcus Morrison, who taught me that music is truth. For my mother, Sarah Morrison, who sacrificed everything so I could pursue music. And for every veteran who came home, changed, who feels invisible, who wonders if they still matter. His voice grew stronger. You matter. We all matter. Our scars don't define us. They're just part of our story. And music, art, beauty. These are how we tell our stories when words aren't enough. He turned back to the piano, placed his left hand on the keys. The arrangement he had worked on for months, stripping down the orchestral masterpiece to its essence, finding the soul of it in single-line melody and sparse harmony. The first notes were almost painfully slow. Barber's famous opening theme now translated to piano singing out in the treble. Each note was given time to breathe, to resonate, to mean something. The audience disappeared. The hall disappeared. Time disappeared. There was only the music and the memories it carried. Jake played for Danny, remembering his friend's laugh, his terrible singing voice, his courage, his sacrifice. The melody swelled, climbing, reaching for something beyond grief. He played for his father, remembering strong hands guiding small hands, believing in a dream, working double shifts so that dream could live. The harmony deepened, complex chords that spoke of love and loss intertwined. He played for his mother, remembering her quiet strength, her faith, that music was worth any sacrifice, her last words to him in the hospital. Make something beautiful from all this pain. He played for every homeless veteran he had known on the streets, the ones who had not made it, who had given up or been forgotten. The music became a prayer, a memorial, a promise that they would not be erased. The piece reached its climax, the moment where the full orchestra in Barber's original version would swell to overwhelming volume. Jake's single left hand could not match that power in decibels, but he matched it in intensity. Every ounce of emotion poured through 5 fingers into ivory and wood, creating sound that filled the enormous hall. Then the descent, the melody falling back down, resolving, finding something like peace. Not happiness, the piece was too honest for that, but acceptance. The kind of hard-won acceptance that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. The final chord, E-flat major, simple, pure, held until the last vibration faded into silence. Jake's hand lifted from the keys. He sat motionless, eyes closed, tears streaming down his face. The music had taken everything he had. He was empty now. Empty and somehow full at the same time. The silence in Carnegie Hall stretched. 3 seconds. 5. 10. And then the applause began. But it was not normal applause. People were standing crying, embracing each other. The sound was not just appreciation for a performance. It was catharsis, release, recognition that they had witnessed something that transcended music. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Jake stood, turned to the audience, bowed deeply. He saw Richard Sterling with his arm around Vanessa, both crying. Marcus saluting, tears on his face. Dr. Brennan and the veterans on their feet, some struggling with wheelchairs and crutches but standing anyway. Professor Mitchell in the wings, openly weeping with pride. The empty seat with Danny's name surrounded by people giving ovation to the brother who had made this all possible. Jake raised his left hand in acknowledgement. This hand that had survived, that had carried him back from the edge, that had proven what was possible when you refused to give up. The applause continued. Jake bowed again, then walked off stage. The curtain fell. The performance was over. Backstage, Professor Mitchell embraced him. No words, just the embrace of a teacher who had found his lost student and watched him soar. Later at the reception, Jake was surrounded again. But it was different than the wedding 6 months ago. These people saw him, really saw him, not as a curiosity or a charity case or a feel-good story, but as an artist who had something true to say and had found a way to say it. Marcus introduced him to veterans who wanted to join the program. Dr. Brennan talked about expanding arts therapy to VA hospitals nationwide. Richard Sterling pledged another $5 million for program development. But the moment Jake would remember most came when a young woman approached. She was maybe 19, wearing an army dress uniform with a Purple Heart medal. Her right sleeve was pinned up empty. "Mr. Morrison," she said quietly. "I'm Emily Ramirez. I lost my arm 6 months ago. IED in Syria. I played violin before I enlisted. I thought my music was over." Her eyes filled with tears. "But tonight you showed me it doesn't have to be, that there's still a way forward." Jake took her hand. "There is. It's hard. It's painful, but it's possible." "Are you interested in the program?" "Yes. More than anything. Then we'll make it happen. I promise." And he meant it. Because this moment right here was why all of it mattered. Not the applause or the accolades, not the comeback story or the redemption narrative. This passing hope to someone who needed it, proving that survival was not the end, but the beginning. The night wound down. Jake finally made it back to his apartment in Juilliard housing. Small, but his. Safe. Home. He sat at his upright piano, the one the school had provided. His left hand rested on the keys. He was exhausted, but not tired. Empty, but not hollow. Jake played a simple melody. Amazing Grace again, the hymn he had played at the wedding. But this time it sounded different. Less like a prayer for help, and more like a prayer of thanks. He played for Danny, for his parents, for everyone who had helped him survive, for Professor Mitchell and Marcus and Richard Sterling and all the others who had believed when belief seemed foolish. But mostly he played for himself, for the man who had stood outside a hotel in the rain 6 months ago, broken and desperate and ready to give up. For the man who had found the courage to open that door, to sit at that piano, to play through the pain and come out the other side. Jake's left hand moved across the keys, and for the first time in 8 years, he was not playing to survive. He was playing because he was alive. The melody faded. The last note hung in the air. Jake smiled. Tomorrow, there would be more work. More students to teach more pieces, to learn more healing to do. The PTSD would not magically disappear. The loss would not stop hurting. The scars, visible and invisible, would always be there. But tonight, in this moment, Jake Morrison was exactly where he was meant to be. Home. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones with the most to teach us. Sometimes the broken places are where the light gets in. Sometimes losing everything is how we discover what truly matters. Jake Morrison's story is not unique. Across America, across the world, there are thousands of veterans struggling with invisible wounds, visible disabilities, and a society that often fails to see them. There are countless talented people whose gifts have been interrupted by trauma, by circumstance, by the cruel randomness of war and life. But Jake's story proves something important. That comeback is possible. That music, art, beauty, these things have power beyond entertainment. They can heal. They can transform. They can take a person society has deemed broken and show them they are whole. The Danny Cross Memorial Initiative at Juilliard continues to grow. It now serves over 200 students a year, veterans and civilians alike, all working to reclaim their artistic voices after trauma or injury. Richard Sterling's foundation has funded similar programs at 15 other major music schools across the country. Dr. Brennan's VA Arts Therapy program has expanded to 42 cities, helping thousands of veterans process trauma through creative expression. Marcus Williams left security work to become the program's national coordinator, connecting veterans with resources and hope. Emily Ramirez, the young woman who approached Jake after his Carnegie Hall performance, enrolled in the program and is now learning adaptive violin technique. She performed her first recital last month. Jake was in the audience clapping until his hand hurt. Vanessa Sterling used her platform as an influencer to bring attention to veteran issues, raising millions in donations and awareness. Her wedding, the night that changed everything, became famous, not for its luxury, but for what happened when one homeless veteran dared to walk through the door. And Jake Morrison continues to play. He teaches at Juilliard, now working with students who are learning to make music with whatever they have. He performs regularly his one-handed technique, now studied by pianists worldwide, as an example of how limitation can inspire innovation. He still has nightmares sometimes, still wakes up reaching for an arm that isn't there, still grieves for Danny and his parents and the life he thought he would have. But he has learned that grief and hope can coexist, that you can mourn what was lost while celebrating what remains. Every year, on the anniversary of Danny's death, Jake performs at Arlington National Cemetery. A simple concert open to anyone who wants to attend. He plays music for the fallen, for the survivors, for the families left behind. It's become a tradition, a moment of beauty in a place of sorrow. Music, it turns out, is more than just notes on a page or sounds in the air. It's communication beyond words. It's proof that beauty can survive anything. It's a bridge between souls connecting us in ways that logic and language cannot. Jake's left hand, scarred and strong, continues to make that bridge every time it touches a piano. One hand playing for two, playing for millions, playing to remind us all that no one is truly invisible, that everyone matters, that everyone deserves to be seen. The little bell keeps ringing. La campanella, calling us to attention, reminding us to look closer, listen deeper, care more. Because you never know who the invisible person on the street might be, what gift they carry, what beauty they could share if only someone gave them the chance. Jake Morrison was given that chance, and he took it with one hand and made music that changed the world. That's the power of never giving up, the power of second chances, the power of believing that broken things can still make beautiful sounds.